theme of me in the theme of meaning, do you have any specific message for fresh graduates, college students, and teenagers?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, a message for teenagers
For teenagers, college students, and fresh graduates.
and
Fresh graduates.
fresh graduates. Okay.
Can you repeat the question for them?
Okay, so the question is, with regard to meaning, whether I have any suggestions for teenagers, college students, and new graduates.
New graduate.
Very important message is the big problem today with people's mind is the addiction to screens. Really? I know I'm saying this in Silicon, this is part of Silicon Valley, the heart of the computer industry, where all the new technologies are being developed. But people find to become so scattered and distracted. I mean, I rely a lot on computers myself for the kind of work that I do. But the problem is that because the internet gives so many points of access that people just jump from one website to another one. They have all of these programs. I don't even know what they are. Like TikTok. Well, can somebody tell me what TikTok is? I don't know.
It's basically something to capture the trend, something quick to capture the trend.
It gives you like these 1 minute, 2 minute videos.
Yeah. 1 minute too long. 10 seconds.
A second.
1 minute.
Yeah. So what I would suggest, very important, of course, you have to use the computer for your learning, for your work, but limit the time. Don't get addicted. And when you use it, have a determination how you're going to use it. So that you use it to, as an assistant to your work or to your studies, but don't become a slave to the computer.
This applies to adults as well.
Excuse me?
This applies to adults.
Yeah.
I have a question in a different direction. Seniors.
Yeah.
I visit friends in their 90s or people live in the senior care homes. They don't seem to have a purpose. They're just kind of living day by day. How to help them?
Yeah. They're living every day. They don't have a what?
They don't have a purpose. They live day to day.
They don't have a sense of purpose.
Yeah. Seniors.
Yeah. Okay. So this is why it's important to develop a sense of purpose and meaning while one still has, I want to say in the prime of life, but maybe many of you not no longer in the prime of life, but you still have a good grip on your mental faculties. Okay, so let's take, say, my teacher, my ordination teacher, he was passed away. He was 1 month short of his 102nd birthday. And I visited him, let's see, his 102nd birthday would have been in August 1998. 1998. I visited him in June 1998. And his mind was sharp and clear. We had Dhamma discussion. And he had just come back at the age of 100, almost 102. He visited Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore, and then came back to Sri Lanka. And in his 90s, he was making visits to the US and England and the US. And so At this age, he has 101, but a purpose, because he's lived his life in the Dhamma. And similarly, like other monks that I know, and even also bhikkhunis. Recently, there was a passed away in Southern California, Ayaguna Sari. She was a Burmese woman who was ordained as a bhikkhuni, living in the desert in Southern California, near sort of southeast of Los Angeles. I'm sure she had a purpose, living with a purpose in her late 80s and 90s as a bhikkhuni. So if you have but you don't have to be a monastic to have that purpose. But when you're in the when your mind is clear and you have a good energy level, then you have some purpose to sustain you. And then that purpose will continue. Of course, that takes place what's unfortunate. It happens to the best people that there can be the onset of senility, degeneration of the mental faculties, so the dementia sets in. Yeah, that can happen. It's unfortunate. It happens to the best people. Sometimes I've known of people who have been very strong meditators, very accomplished meditators, but the dementias can set in. It just seems to be part of the human condition that we have to deal with. But as long as if you're in an advanced age and you have clear mind, you have to find some way to find some purpose, even if you're not becoming a great Buddhist practitioner, but at least find some hobby or some interest to give one some sense of meaning in one's life. Yeah, please.
Um, I guess for me, I've been like I just graduated with my master's in clinical psychology and I'm trying to, make the world a better place, but at the same time I just feel so run down and exhausted. I'm
So cut down and
yeah, exhausted.
exhausted.
So tired. Like being an adult is tiring, but also like helping people is tiring.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how I can similarly to you, I'm like giving everything away and there's nothing left. So how to stay like grounded um and sometimes I feel helpless. Like I'm helping so much, but it's still not enough.
Yeah, the sense of especially people is what I call the helping um that industry or the professions, the helping profession, whether it's in charity work or psychological counseling. Of course, you're getting exposed to so much suffering. And if you're not careful, if you don't develop a kind of mental hygiene, you could easily get burnt out. There was an expression that was going around some years ago. It's called compassion fatigue, where you're trying to help people and you're enjoying it when you're able to do it, but you just use your resources beyond your capacity. So for this, you have to find some way to apportion your time so that you reserve time for yourself and can withdraw into yourself. And this is why some kind of mindfulness practice or meditation practice is beneficial. Because when you do this, then you build up and strengthen your own inner resources. So you really do have to set aside that time. And it's not just time for meditation, but to do any kind of interest, hobby, or to interact with your own family members, or even to go on periodic trips, vacations, to keep, sustain one's inner strength and stability. And that enables you to serve others more effectively. Even I find the need to do that too, like each year now during the winter, usually right after the New Year's Day, then I have well, actually the monastery, the Zhuangyan monastery sort of closes to the public, so you don't have public activity. So I do have just I continue, I don't do the sutta class, my Saturday sutta class, instead I turn it For the people on the registration list, we do an all-day meditation on Saturdays. And I could still do the Wednesday meditation. But then I have like the 3 months where I'm a monk, so I'm entitled to it.
Meditation in the winter.
Yeah, this is on Saturdays, morning and evening, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening meditation. Yeah, so you have to strike a healthy balance.
And then we have a question online in the Zoom.
Yeah.
So, a participant on Zoom said that her question was the thin stress the basic ethical conduct and support for one's family and community in the book of the Buddha's teaching on social and communal harmony? I couldn't read. Under the assumption that the active community engagement presides the advanced spiritual development. It's in the chat.
Well, I see it on the chat. It's a rather complicated question.
Yeah.
Excuse me, can I repeat the question?
You're the person who asked the question?
Yeah, my question was the book Bounty stressed in the Buddha's teachings on social and communal harmony.
Yeah.
Okay, do we assume or is it under the assumption that the active community engagements precede the advanced spiritual development?
This depends very much on the individual. Like some people maybe will be first have very active community engagement, developing a sort of foundation of an ethical life by involvement with family and community. And on that basis, then they will build up sort of the inner resources through which later they might want to devote then more time to cultivating internal spiritual development, whereas others from an early time might be sort of inclined to the life of, say, monastic life, renunciation, and then, developing their meditative practice. And then they might, at a later point in their life, once they develop a strong resources of knowledge and understanding of the Dhamma and meditative experience, then they might function in the community as Dhamma teachers or meditation teachers. Yeah, like say in my own life, so I became like a college student, graduate student, not actively so much involved with the family, with community, and then in Sri Lanka, living pretty secluded, of course involved with the monastics in the places where I was living, but studying the Dhamma, practicing meditation. Then in the 1990s in Sri Lanka, then I started giving Dhamma talks, and then coming back to the US and giving Dhamma talks and teaching. So yeah, so it depends very much on the person. Different people have different trajectories.
So I think some of us, maybe we've studied some Buddhism, we have some basic theoretical understanding, but what if somebody still, for example, still feels depressed or still doesn't find meaning, even though theoretically they understand, precepts, generosity,
Yeah.
so they learn some Buddhism, but how do you translate that into deeper actual realization or a feeling? Is it just continued practice, or is there something more?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that there can be cases of depression, of what they call clinical depression, which are to some extent maybe determined by, say, biochemical processes. So it might be the case, and here I'm not an expert, so please don't take my word as being authoritative, that not all cases of depression are caused directly by psychological stress and disappointment, but there can be in people maybe biochemical reasons for people to undergo periods of depression.
Not just clinical depression, but like say somebody's like, oh, I see the current administration, they're doing so many bad things.
Yeah.
From Buddha's point of view, we understand karma is beyond this lifetime. We still try to do what's right.
Yeah.
But if everybody else is not doing what's right, and you just kind of feel like, is there a point to me still doing the right thing if everybody else is not doing the right thing, and it's making me,
Okay.
an outlier or
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, let's see, it's sutta number 8, where the Buddha is instructing the monks. He says, you should reflect thus, others might be cruel, but we won't be cruel. Others might be dishonest, we won't be dishonest. Others might be speakers of falsehood, we won't be speakers of falsehood. And it goes on and on like that through some 44 items. Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. So even if, when others transgress moral principles, one shouldn't go with the flow. One should really be firm in upholding ethical principles. But okay, but that's one side of your question. But also the other side is like what happens when you feel maybe upset, angry, disappointed with the way things are going. I mean, this is where, on the one hand, we have to, I say, act even vigorously to promote the greater good. And I'll be speaking more about this. Today is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. This is the Buddhist approach to social and socially transformative action. But okay, but let's just say, apart from that, just say sometimes sometimes changes in mood come in the mind. Sometimes we try to do our best, but we don't succeed with our work and family relationships. They come stress, disappointment. So we just have to learn how to deal with these problems. And sometimes when you try to do your best and things don't work out, that's where you have to develop the quality of we call equanimity, upekkha, where you do your best, but when things don't really work out, then you sometimes have to use certain themes of reflection to enable oneself to accept the situation. So what I found, the two themes that help to develop equanimity, one is a theme of that each person is responsible for their own karma. So you can do your best to advise, say, people in your family circle or community, to advise them, to try to help them, to uplift them. And sometimes they don't follow your advice, they just go on in their own way. And then you just at a certain point have to say, okay, they're going to follow their own direction. I did my best, and just they are responsible for their own action. I just remain firm in my commitments to my principles. So that helps to develop equanimity. And another useful tool is to apply the teaching of anatta or non-self. It doesn't have to be a deep insight, but say others are insulting you, abusing you, trying to cheat you, neglecting you, and so forth, then you just apply the idea that there is no self that's inflicting this abuse, and I am not a self who's receiving it. These are just bundles of aggregates, bundles of the five aggregates engaged in this process. And so when you apply this idea of non-self and of anatta, it helps to establish equanimity.
Easy said than done. Easy said than done.
Easier said than done, but it's by practicing or trying to apply that you start to develop the skill. It doesn't come instantaneously, but it's a skill to be developed, just like becoming a good, I don't know, good tennis player or a good swimmer. You have to practice, and to practice, you develop the skill.
Thanks for explaining the five kinds of wealth. If you want to read more about what was the source that you mentioned? If you want to read more about five kinds of wealth, what is the book to buy?
Well, it's only just a short sutta. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya. So this is the numerical discourses of the Buddha. That's the title of my translation. But it's only one sutta, about one page.
Okay.
But this is where, if you read like many suttas, then you find sort of elaborations on these themes.
We have the book in our library.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing about the suttas is that it's a bit puzzling to me. It seems to me that the suttas are almost like outlines of the discourses that the Buddha must have given. Because if you go to hear somebody give a Dhamma talk, you expect them to talk 45 minutes or an hour, right? If they just enumerate certain principles and they're finished after 2 or 3 minutes and they just sit silently, you're disappointed. But most of these suttas, like in the Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, you could recite it out loud 2 or 3 minutes. So I think that the Buddha must have given more elaborate explanations, but in order to preserve the texts in a way that could be transmitted, because they didn't have tape recorders, or they didn't have used writings, they didn't have scribes to write everything down, so they had to preserve things through memory. So they really, I think, take the essential principles and then formulate them into a uniform mode of expression that could be easily memorized and then transmitted through memorization through later generations. But when you take all of the texts together, then you have at least the Sutta Pitaka, what about 20 volumes? Digha Nikaya has 3 parts. Majjhima Nikaya has 3 parts. Samyutta Nikaya 5 parts. Anguttara Nikaya, well, there are 11 chapters, though we could say they could fit into about 5 books. So 5, 5, 3, and 3, so 16 parts to the 4 Nikayas. And then the Khuddaka Nikaya, the miscellaneous collection, there are about 15 books there, but a lot of them are just not really so essential.
Use AI to help the search.
Use AI to help the search. Yeah, but to get what I did back 2005, 2004, 2005, Wisdom Publications, they wanted to have a textbook for colleges consisting of an anthology of suttas that could be used as a textbook for college students in courses on religions or Buddhist studies. So they asked me to compile this. And so I went through the texts and put together an anthology, which was published with the title In the Buddha's Words. Yeah, so I don't suggest starting with a full Nikaya, because easy to get lost. It just becomes incomprehensible because there's often no rational principle underlying the organization of the text. Often it's just certain key words that are used as a basis for grouping the suttas together. Yeah, so I used a systematic structure for taking the suttas and then putting them into the little pigeonhole so that you get a kind of bird's eye view of the whole architecture of the teaching of the early Buddhist teachings.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, maybe we have time for one more question, if there is one.
Oh, so lately I've been, when I was young, I used to do art and really love art, but I'm kind of wondering, how does art play into meaning in life, but also like, I don't know, mindfulness or whatever. Like nowadays, people don't really care about art. It's like not a priority, right? We're all like trying to make money or whatever. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on like art.
Yeah, I think art, though it's not like listed among the sources of wealth, and we don't find so much emphasis on art in the Buddha's teaching, but I think art in all traditional cultures is a very important source of meaning and gives a sense of delight and meaning to one's life, whether it's through painting, sculpture, writing poetry. In fact, in Buddhist cultures, even though there's not much emphasis on art and you find in the Buddhist teachings, but all the different Buddhist cultures have developed a very rich heritage of visual arts, sculpture, styles of chanting, literature, poetry. Yeah, so whatever field of art helps to give some kind of deep sense of meaning. And I think art, in a way, connects us to what I would call a transcendent dimension of meaning to our lives. One of the sad things, like this, one of my criticisms of Buddhism, when we listen to the music that comes out from the Christian tradition, very, magnificent music like Bach, Mozart, Vivaldi, the earlier music. And I used to love that music so much. And then when you take the monastic precepts, Nachakita Madita, Vesuka Dasana, Veramani, Sikapadang Samadhiyami. And so as a result, Buddhism has not produced such that rich heritage of music.
Music nowadays, songs, people sing songs.
Yeah, there are some Buddhists who have like, Buddhist songs. But we don't have the Buddhist classical music the way we have the Christian classical music, especially the Baroque music of Bach, Handel, and Mozart, Haydn. One of my aspirations for the different field was when I was in high school, was to become a jazz musician.
Sujata was a musician himself.
Yeah, I think Sujata was a rock musician.
Yes.
In my case, I wanted to be a jazz musician, so I started taking music lessons. I wanted to become a saxophonist. And I thought that I could just begin after a few lessons, I could be able to play jazz. Instead, the music teacher was teaching me I had to learn things like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Michael, Michael, row your boat ashore. I can't do this. I thought you just pick up the instrument and start. And then I became discouraged, and then I lost interest.
Nyan Tiloka himself was a violin virtuoso.
Yeah, this is my teacher's teacher. He was the first German monk. He was a classical violinist. I think he was German, but I think he studied the violin in the conservatory in Paris and then became a concert violinist. And one of his music teachers gave him a book on Buddhism and said, "This is very interesting." They said, "But don't get any crazy ideas in your mind about becoming a monk." And but when he read the book, I thought, I want to become a monk. And so what he did, he thought that Buddhism was flourishing in India. So what he did was to get arranged to perform, to give performances at certain stops along the way from Europe, in Egypt, maybe in Iran at the time, till he got to India. When he arrived in India, he asked, "Where is Buddhism? Where are all the Buddhists?" I said, I think this was Bombay or now Mumbai. "Where are all the Buddhists?" They told him, "We don't have Buddhism here in India. If you want Buddhism," and this is like beginning of the 20th century, "you go to Ceylon, yeah, at that time called Ceylon, the British colony." So then he went to Ceylon, but then he heard when he was in Ceylon that there was a Scottish monk, English-speaking Scottish monk in Burma. So then he went to Burma and he took ordination in Burma. But then he came back to Sri Lanka and he established a monastery in Sri Lanka, or a hermitage, the island hermitage of Dodandua in southwest Sri Lanka. He established the hermitage for European monks. And then the person who became sort of my mentor, a spiritual teacher, he came because the German monks were deported from Sri Lanka after World War I, because the British were suspicious of the German monks. So they took them to what they call a camp, internment camp in Australia. Then after World War I, they released the German monks. And then Yanatiloka, let's probably somehow he went to Hawaii. Eventually he went to China, his idea. He wound up in Japan, but he thought that there were Theravadan monasteries sort of following the Burmese tradition, but over the border in Yunnan.
Really?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are such monasteries. Yeah, there are Theravadan monasteries, either from the Burmese influence or Thai influence, because that part of China close to Burma and Thailand. So he had the idea to travel across China, and he did that with a lot of difficulties. And it reached a certain point where then he was arrested by the authorities, and he suspected that this was done by the instructions of the British, that the British were putting pressure on the Chinese to arrest that German monk. He was traveling in Yanatiloka with another German monk. So they were arrested and imprisoned in China. And while in prison, Yanatiloka learned some Chinese. It seems he was quite good with languages. Yeah, you could find it. Yes, but published by the Buddhist Publication Society. I think it's called The Life of Nyanatiloka, the first German Buddhist monk or European Buddhist monk of modern times. And I found even after he became a monk, he didn't have a violin, but he used to write music. And
As a composer.
yeah, because I was actually 1984, I came to live. You see, in his later years, Nyanatiloka moved from the island hermitage, which is in the south, to Kandy, because the hot, humid climate of the island hermitage he found rather oppressive in his later years, whereas he liked Kandy had a very temperate climate, much cooler, not as the humidity, not the high humidity of Kandy. So he moved to Kandy, and the place that he came to live in was called the Forest Hermitage. And this was in 1951, he moved there. And then his student, the other German monk, Nyanaponika, came to move to the Forest Hermitage and live with Nyanatiloka. And so they were living together at the Forest Hermitage. And then from 1956 or so, Venerable Nyanatiloka had developed prostate cancer, was developed, and so he had to move to Colombo. And then he passed away in 1957, I think at the age of 79. But Nyanaponika, his student, continued to live at the Forest Hermitage. And in 1984, an American monk came to live at the Forest Hermitage with Nyanaponika. That is myself. Well, actually, I lived at the Forest Hermitage in the 1970s, let's see, 1976, 77. And then when I came to Sri Lanka, when I came back to Sri Lanka, I spent a few months in 1982 at the Forest Hermitage. But in 1984, then I came to live permanently at the Forest Hermitage from 1984 until 2002.
Was he the one passing down the publication society to you?
Yeah. Then when I came to live with Venerable Nyanaponika, when he was 83 years old, and then he passed on the editorship of the Buddhist Publication Society to me.
Was it Anoya? Venerable and Anoya tried to meet him, but then missed him because.
Yeah, Venerable Navio came to Sri Lanka, let's see, 1994. I think he had been in India. He was not yet a monk. He was like a anagarika. Yeah, he was wearing like brown clothes, trousers, and a shirt. Let me get the year correct. Okay, so I don't remember when he arrived in Sri Lanka. His intention was to meet Venerable Nyanaponika, but when he arrived there, Venerable Nyanaponika had passed away. So he was staying as an anagarika in a meditation center. And then I remember one day I had gone, it was a Saturday in February, I had gone to the Buddhist Publication Society to do some work on the computer there. And the bookshop was open on Saturday. And then a young man came up to me and introduced himself to me. Yeah. And he said he was interested in learning Abhidharma. And so I gave him some instruction. I suggested if he wanted to learn Abhidhamma, he should start off with the work that I had compiled, the comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma. But I told him, I said that even though the Abhidhamma is useful in giving kind of systematic account of the teaching, but it's most important to go to the original sources, to the Sutta Pitaka. And then some months later, he came to visit me together with an Englishman who was living in Sri Lanka. And they came to get some advice about how to continue to deepen their life in the Dhamma. And I said, if you want to do that, the best thing to do is to get ordained, become a monk.
Did you take him? Did you take him up as your student?
No, but I suggested that he get sort of ordained within the Sri Lankan lineage, so that he would be recognized by the Sri Lankan monks. And so then he actually got ordained with my ordination teacher, Palangoda Ananda Maitreya. And then he came to live in a meditation center just outside the forest where I was living. And so he would come to see me in those days to get advice from me for deepening his studies with Dhamma questions and questions about Pali. And the other British man who came to see me together with Hinalayo got ordained with the name Ananda Jyoti. And he has a very, very valuable website called Ancient Buddhist Texts. I think he lives in Malaysia, but he became very fluent in Sinhalese language, even to the point where he was giving sermons, discourses in Sinhalese language. And he's very good in Pali and then learned Sanskrit. And there's many, many texts on his website, Ancient Buddhist Texts. And so both of them are, in a sense, of course, Venerable Analayo would become a very accomplished scholar, learning the ancient Chinese, Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, even to some Tibetan. And Venerable Ananda Jyoti became very learned in Sinhalese, Pali, and Sanskrit. So both of them surpassed the teacher, or the one who gave them the advice.
Wonderful story. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe time to end our session.